Hello. What up? What's going on? How's everyone doing? Uploading stories. Hello, hello. Let's see where we were at last Friday. Where did I leave off? I think should recognize that one. So we were at Murph. Murph with the slightly updated pics below. Okay. It's good. How are you guys? Click these, move this Dremel out of the way. I have been assembling so many Kingdom Death models, you guys. I've just got piles of them over here. Just figures. Just so many figures. Michael Paints Minis, good evening. Thanks for the 9 months. Appreciate it. All right, we got Murph with an orc. What does he have to say about his orc? Hi, Eric. A bit late for Orktober. Yeah, just a couple months. Well, I guess when he posted this was in the beginning of November, so. Painted this guy up for fun. Would love your feedback on the volumes and colors. How would you recommend pushing this further if it was intended for a competition? Okay. So this is an interesting question because intended for competition. One thing, let's look at, do I have the right thing? There we go. Okay, now we can look at Discord. So, hello. So this is interesting because let's talk about model selection for competition. What makes a good model for competition? Do you guys think this is a good model to put in a competition? I'm not so sure. I think you can do okay with an academic models, but yeah, there's not a lot of opportunity to show different things on it, right? These academic busts, like, I see them quite a bit, and I think you're putting yourself at a disadvantage entering them. Hi, E-Baker. Yeah, it's a little hard for me to say, like, okay, well, here's what you need to do to push this for a competition figure when it might not be the best figure for competition in the first place. I can correct things, I think, on it, but it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't give you a lot of opportunities to show things off. That being said, let's look at some things. So they were asking about volumetrics and color. Color-wise, I think it's quite nice. In terms of finish, yeah, there's some issues. Okay, there's definitely some like blending problems around the neck specifically. And I think there's probably a little, we've got some blending issues sort of here. So let's look at this. This is very interesting because the paint is sort of shiny and you can see the light like reflecting in the collarbone, right? So it's like down in the neck, right? So when you have this more slightly forward lighting, it can be very odd, like counterintuitive to think that like there's this recess here, you know, with the collarbone. Show some skin. Yeah, you have this recess here with the collarbone, but the light is actually reaches down into here. Okay? So you have to consider that like where the light is hitting and not necessarily like what is recessed and not. I see you did it like a bit here, right? You have this sort of thing going on here, which is semi-correct, but then we need to think about these spots where the light's also hitting. Okay? So thinking of them as light and shadow, so volumes, right? The volumetrics of it, okay? We have some parts that are what is light and what is shadow. So what is a shadow value on this? Treader, thanks for the prime. Appreciate you. So we need to think about what is like a shadow value, what is a light value? Is this yellow a light or is this a highlight? Up here, this would be considered more of a highlight value. This is sort of a halftone before the shadows. And Nymara, thanks for the prime. Appreciate it. Then this is like a very deep shadow value. Okay. So one thing is that I'm seeing is that I don't really have a clear picture over like what's a shadow value and what's a light necessarily. I have sort of these lighter values up here, but these could be considered more kind of highlights. Then I have these sort of too close values. And then I have these like this dark purpley color, which is these extreme shadows that kind of show up under his eyes and in sort of these recesses. I have even sort of these sort of tones here. So maybe this is more of a shadow value, but these two are kind of similar. So we need to think about light and shadow like in terms of larger shapes, right? So what's the lighting direction here? What's under the neck? How much of this is like shadow under the neck? Does this get covered? And then is the rest all in light, you know? And if it's in light, then we need to be working in values sort of like this, these sort of halftones. That means that none of this really area of the neck is going to have any sort of this sort of shadow tone. Okay. I get that, yeah, maybe the light is coming in slightly from the left, but I don't see that a ton based on the face. So more of the neck here is a little more in light than you're sort of doing at the moment. Okay, so then we can add some shadow sort of here, get some of these little halftone type shadows. Bundatron, hello, thanks for following. Hi. All right. Then we can start working in some of these highlights. So the highlights, they need to go where we're seeing these shines, right? And these are based on the viewer's perspective. So sometimes these highlights fall in the recesses, all right? Like you have kind of here with the collarbone. You might have some light that works like this if it's always a little more forward towards the viewer, right? So we're going to get some light that kind of falls into these these recesses a little more and kind of works up here onto the neck some. And then we get some light, sort of halftone lights around here. And then we can start to build out even brighter highlights where we need. All right. So there's this subtle game of playing with these halftone lights, right? And then actual highlights that exist on top. All right, something along these lines. And not all of these are going to be like pure highlight, right? So we can push the light even more using some of these like really bright yellows that you've got up here. And some of these are going to fall into these like very small areas of light like this that come down here into the neck. And then some of these areas like in the neck recesses like here, right? So it can be quite difficult to see some of this stuff sometimes, these sort of highlights like in the recesses, but this is why I would recommend taking like a lighting reference to see sort of where these highlights fall. Even down here, you get like a little bit of highlight sort of in the middle of the chest on this lower part. I'm working something like this, okay? So the neck is, yeah, it's not as maybe shadowed as you think it is. And then also there's also some like softer areas, all right? Then you can work on like blending it out and smoothing all this stuff over and creating like more subtle micro volumes and things, but we need to get kind of the initial shape of the light right before we go crazy thinking about like all the little tiny volumes and stuff. All right, we can even add some more shadows in some of these areas depending on how much this cuts under. But it's always yeah, I see people have really struggle a lot with like the necks on their models sometimes because you have all these little muscles and stuff in there, and then depending on the position of the light, it can be a little difficult to see where these little shapes start to show up. Okay. Now, we can also simplify a little here on the side of the face. All right. And then we can start to play a bit with like the bounce lights that come in. So maybe something like this happens. So we have this, we can take even some of this like deep shadow, begin to work this into the face, create the like core shadow on the face here. You get this like very dark part to the face. You would also have shadow under the nose. In fact, the pink here on the nose is probably a bit too much. This is like too pink. We want to stick to more like these sort of orangish grays, which will read as like a pinkish color. See, this gray reads kind of red because of the orange, right? So this complementary, this gray sort of tone begins to read reddish, even though it's not really red. It's more like a yellow sort of orange. And then we can blend this together a little more naturally. Like, it's not like lips or something where it's a separate skin tone, right? Like, or a separate type of skin. Your nose isn't really like a different type of skin. It's just like has a slight differentiation in coloration. So yeah, there's gums, but then also we want to like adjust the color somewhat. We want to shift the color, but we don't want to do it so much that you're really like this is too pink, right? For this sort of feeling. You want something a little more subtle here. Right, so you could play with these sort of like brownish colors to give a bit of that red feeling without going crazy. And then also, yeah, you're going to have sometimes like things like this where the nostrils sort of connect. So it doesn't feel like his nose is like stuck onto his face. It is like it's a part of his face, right? So these sorts of things, especially the kind of like pig noses of an orc, like you want that, right? It's like if I went like this, right? Right? Like there's no line there separating it. The skin connects. Okay? So we have to connect. We have to connect that. Okay. All right. So adjust some of those things, and then we can start to do things like play with some of these middle values that are very saturated, and we can start to create some of the bounce light. Probably have to go up in value a little bit here. We can play with like the bounce light coming off of his neck. That's going to create some of this sort of effect like this, where you get light that is hitting his chest or shoulder and then bouncing back up onto his face. Okay, so, and then yeah, then it's going to come down to blending, smoothing these things out a little bit, right? Creating more micro details as you go. And just refining, right? All those things are things that you would do on a, I don't even like to really think about it as like competition models and whatever. It's like, it's up to you how far you want to push a figure. But, I mean, these are things you would need to do for competition, right? But here we're just trying to refine, Okay. And then beyond that, I think you could maybe push the highlights like a little bit more and make them like a little more rounded. Instead of little lines, we want to think about the highlight as like a reflection of the light source. So we create some of these highlight shapes. You want to avoid hard lines typically on a face. Like you have these strong highlights around the mouth, but then maybe you would have maybe this highlight would like run all the way along his mouth, kind of like this. And you would probably have more highlight like on his lip, probably on his tongue. Especially if the tongue is kind of wet, you're going to have very strong highlight sort of tones. And the gums and stuff. Hello, Mystic Amethyst Minis. Thanks for the raid. Huh? Also, didn't you just place in a Squidmore comp? You talking to me? No, I didn't enter the Squidmore painting competition. No, I'm good. There's no reason to be embarrassed. I have a couple awards. Thanks. Anyways, something like that. All right. So if we look at the kind of before and after, Baba Ganoush, thanks for the gifted tier 1. I did enter Squidmar last year, yeah. Yeah, dude, I gotta build my. I'm working on getting enough metal so I can build my Scrooge McDuck swimming pool. Okay, so you can see the sort of before and after. Okay. You guys typing now, we're probably not going to get to, but I'll get as far as I can. Black Cat. Hi, Eric. Can you give me general feedback on this owl here? This was my first time doing this style of NMM. Not sure if I pulled it off fully. And if you can also give me some general feedback on this too, I would really appreciate it. Let's take a look. Guys. Okay. I think it works okay. Oh, hi, Albert. What's up, dude? Albert, I'd like to have you on one of these one time. I think it would be fun to have you also do one of these. So, I think the contrast works well. For the NMM, particularly the steel. The gold, yeah, it's not bad. What we want to do is we want to think about shapes and direction a little more, okay? So one of the things I'm seeing is like this sort of shape here, right? Can you see this? It's like, what shape is this shoulder pen? It's kind of spherical, right? So the shape of the reflection should also kind of follow the shape of the shoulder. Sweet, yeah, we should do it. It'll be fun. Yeah, so we want to think about like following the shape of the shoulder a little more. Same with these sorts of things. We have these sort of spherical objects, right? And we want them to be sort of consistent, but they're not complete spheres. So we need to think about like on each one, where would the reflection be? Where would the main reflection be? So let's start with first getting the sort of sky reflection, okay? I don't really like to think of, I like to think about NMM as like sort of environmental. All right, so on each one, the sky reflection is kind of going to be on top of each sphere, right? And then we'll have a bit of a ground reflection. Now this one faces mostly upwards, so majority of that is facing upwards, right? So it's going to be mostly sky. Same with this. This is actually almost, this is basically all facing upwards too, even though it looks like it might be facing downwards. If we look at the image from the side, you can see that it's angled upwards because of the the way it, like the chest rounds over, so this piece is not like flat to the ground like this, it's leaning up, right? Then we need to think about, we have a darker reflection sort of in the middle, right? Which you're going to have. Okay, so you have this darker reflection sort of in the center, which is like sort of represents the horizon. Okay, and then depending on what color the ground is, you'll have a sort of lower reflection like this, maybe slightly lighter, maybe slightly more yellow, right? You might have a ground reflection doing something like so, right? You also get very interesting, when you have this much metal next to each other, you often get reflections of the metal itself, and when metal reflects itself, it turns very saturated. So you might end up with things like this, where you're reflecting the piece of metal next to it. All right, and then the same with these guys. We need to find the ones that are facing directly at the light, and then as they start to curve away, the reflection's going to change. All right. So I treat these feathers as one big shape, and then I start treating them as separate shapes. All right. Then we move to the yellow, and we need to start adding the main highlights. So if we go based on the armor where it's kind of here, that means it's going to be more centralized on each one of these, slightly to the right on each one of these guys. And then as it moves, we're always keeping it kind of towards the viewer. Okay, so they begin to shift. So really the key to painting a successful non-metallic is, one, how much contrast you use, and are the reflections consistent with each other, right? Is the placement consistent? Okay. Then I can push some extra shadow if I need. But and then let's take this guy and give a nice strong reflection here. Right, something like that. And then maybe this whole feather just happens to be like in the correct position to get the strongest reflection, and then maybe it weakens as it goes across, right? So maybe this whole feather is nice and bright, and then as it goes down and across, we might lose some of that strength. So what we end up seeing is that, right, like the difference between this before, where the reflection is kind of the same on each one, and also it's very like crescented across the top of each sphere. Now the reflection is more centralized, similar to the way you place the reflection in the eye, right? In fact, the reflection on the ball, like the necklace thing, should match the reflection in the eye, because it's the same light source creating both reflections. Okay, so if we think of each one of these little spheres as another eye, like little dome shape, you're gonna, the reflection on each one, they're gonna match. Then you can start to do things like push some of the edge highlighting, like this back edge is going to catch the light. Some of these edges might be in a position to really catch the light right. And we create, like even here might catch the light, here might catch the light. Okay. I hope this makes sense. Same on these guys. I would simplify this. Like, you don't need this much of this dark over here. In fact, it doesn't really make sense to have this super dark black on these parts. You can use it over here, which I guess works. And I would probably extend that down this way. And then we can start to do some things like add extra reflections, right? So instead of just one big reflection, we start to create some noise in order to add some more interest and form to it, create these like secondary reflection to make the shape more the pattern more interesting. So, right, before, after. Cool. Now, in terms of other feedback, I think the owl is not bad. I think the cloak's not bad. Like the owl head's not bad, but I don't get too much of a sense, and this can be very difficult with such a large surface, but I don't get too much of a sense of shape here, that I would try and like round this over a little bit to try and create a little shadows here to give some shape to the owl. When you do this much texturing, it can often be pretty difficult to maintain a light source. But doing something along these lines where we come in and add like a little bit of extra highlights in some spots to give a little more form to the feathers. So we create texture and form at the same time. All right. So you can see the difference between before. Let's put these in the group together. There we go. All right. Before and after. Like now the owl head has a bit more shape to it. Yeah. You can feel like that it's a bit more rounded. Cool. Cool. Okay, go to the bottom so that I can go up and it won't keep losing place. Jesus. Steve. I already did Steve's. Margaret, I already did this one, yeah, I think. Yes, because I talked about like the base and the and like picking out kind of the ambience and like what the basing and stuff is going to be like. Gerbil Papa. Hi Eric, would love some feedback on this happy chat. Okay, let's do it. So, this is a good example of like values of materials, okay? So what I mean by that is like if I were to ask you guys, like, what is the lightest value, like, what is the lightest thing on this figure? You would probably say the white, okay? Then next in order of value would be what? Like, we're going lightest thing to darkest thing. Anyone? Skin? Okay, probably the skin next. All right. The forehead is not a thing, it's skin. Skin's the material. Right? Then what? Probably you think the leather or the orange part? I don't know if it's supposed to be leather. And then probably the like black straps. And the metal is sort of its own thing, right? Metal, because metal's weird. Metal doesn't have much of its own sort of value, depending on, like, certain metals are slightly lighter than others, you know? But, like, can you really tell the difference between this can and this steel? Like, the aluminum is slightly lighter, but on average, but it's not so different that, like, you can tell a lot. Like, I can see that the steel is, like, slightly darker on average, but it's pretty difficult to observe the general average value of metallics, unless it's like a blackened steel or something, you know. So, all that's to say, yeah. So, when we see it like this, it's a lot harder to tell what is, like, in terms of value jumps. I would say, yeah, the shirt is pretty clearly lighter, or the white section, and then, but the skin, this one and the other one, all sort of feel the same. Yeah. The skin has, like, a little more highlight on it. So what I would say is we need to work a bit on creating, like, really making these feel different, okay? So one thing I would recommend, let's put this layer on top. I think we could push the light a bit more on the skin in general, all right? Okay, so that's one thing. And then maybe the orange parts need to be slightly lighter. Maybe some of these parts need to be slightly lighter. To create visual hierarchy between the different elements. All right, now that's cool, but how do we bring some more interest to this piece? Okay, because right now everything is sort of samey, right? So what if we introduced some color? All right, so what if we played around with some of the shadows and played with this sort of orange, and we introduce some color like into the shadow tones, right? We can also create like this sort of feeling of space or whatever you're trying to do, right? Like we can create some sort of, instead of using just like grays, right? It's weird. Right? So instead of using just grays, we can use some these like bluish gray tones, right? So instead of like a pure gray, we get these like blue gray tones. Right? Then we can do sort of the same thing to the lights if we want to play with some of the lights. So here we can play with the highlights and make them more yellowish or something along these lines, right? We could even play with make them slightly greenish. There's ways to make this more interesting from a ambience perspective. Okay. Hi, Liza, and thanks for the tier 1, dude. Appreciate you. Okay. So we can make the piece more interesting from a colors perspective by introducing more tonality into all these very neutral colors, right? The way you need to be thinking about this is how do we create like what kind of ambience are you going for, you know? Like, is it like you have the obvious, this sort of space zombie kind of thing, right? So how do we make what kind of atmosphere can we do for space zombies? Like, what do you think of when you think of space zombies? So oftentimes I will enjoy some take some inspiration from film or whatever. Bokanor, hello, thank you. You might think of something like Dead Space, right? And if we just look at the images for Dead Space, okay, what sort of average, like, what kind of colors do you see, right? What's the color palette of Dead Space? There's two very common colors that come up. Sort of, yeah, teal and kind of brown, right? This is like orange brown, okay? So, but kind of counterintuitively, okay, if we go back to look at this, sort of counterintuitively, like, are we seeing, what color do you see more in the shadows and what color do you see more in the lights, right? It might be a little, a little different than what you might initially expect from. So this one you have very teal sort of colors in the shadows, very warm lights, but in this one you have these very you have a mix of both. So yeah, there's a lot of these like sepia tones. So we could even, instead of this guy, let's turn this one off, create another one. We can try another ambience, okay? So instead of the one we did, we could, what if we try and instead making the shadows very warm, so we go like very orangey shadows, right? And then we can do something like these very cool teal sort of highlights, right? And we can play around with these sort of different feeling. Now this is really exaggerated, but if we turn this down and blend it back together with a little bit with the other one, we end up with this this sort of interesting ambience where we have this kind of sepia toned thing with this like cool highlights that give it this cold sort of more undead feeling, right? So yeah, there's a lot of ways you can go. This is one thing I like to take inspiration from video games or movies or whatever. They tend to have very interesting color grading and ambiences. Another one might be like Event Horizon or I don't know, other space horror, Alien, something like that, right? Okay. Dan. Mr. Dan DeGaulle. I finally got the chance to go back and to this piece from your class at Nova, focused mostly on skin tones, but anything you see would be helpful. Cool. She looks quite nice. Not where I wanted to go. So I think general shape of light is quite good. There's some weirdness going on in the eyeshadow. It's like very kind of chalky purple. There's something a little odd. The hair looks quite good. The blue is also pretty good. But there's something weird going on with the eyes. This like bounce light you're trying to do. Yeah, the values are off here. Do you guys see that light is too light? That purple is like off and slightly too bright. Okay. So, and then when it's in color, it's even more slightly off. So, first thing I would do is I would just get rid of this. Okay, and darken that down. Now, shape here is pretty good. I think it's a very subtle, there's a lot of very subtle volumes on the face of this figure. And I think some of them can be very difficult to see. So there's little things like adding this sort of shape to the corner of the mouth, right? It's this shape, right? It's like a sort of D shape here, D shape here. We can start to create a little bit of subtle form in the corner of the mouth, these sort of dimples, right? And then we can reduce them if we need to soften them out. Okay. Getting the nose nice and defined. Then these shapes, we want this shape to wrap up over a little, okay? So it doesn't just stop at like the corner. It comes up into here. Because if you look at me, right? She has a bit of an Asian look to her when they have different eyelids than we do. So they don't have the double eyelid or whatever it's called, where it's like the line is very clear. Okay. So some of this is like a little harsh. So we might want to increase the light here a little bit, so that this is not so deep in the, like it's not quite so recessed here. So something more of like a mid-tone. Can soften this out a little bit, soften this. We actually probably want to bring this over slightly based on the light. The curve would start to happen more here. And then we have these very large blocks of highlight. Okay. I'm going to try and draw the light here. So we have like a very large block of highlight here that's like, it sort of takes up this whole thing. Right, so what we want to do is we want to try and create some, what we probably want to do is tone it down a little bit so we have some space to create highlights, right? So something slightly darker. All right. Now, two things. One thing here, shadow of the nose. Okay, small shadow of the nose. Probably exaggerate this slightly. And then once we start adding the actual highlights, where are these highlights going to go? Right? We might get one like here and around the nose. It also, this depends. So I'm assuming that this is the main view based on like the photo, right? So where are we going to get these sort of highlights, right? You get this one here, you get this one right here. Then this one you'd get a highlight that comes out like this across the cheekbone, right? This might connect down to here, here. Right. So there's some very subtle volume work that happens in when you're dealing with like facial structure, especially on a figure like this, that you can really start to create these super subtle like volume work here, okay? Based on just how you do just how you paint the highlights, right? All right, so working on the highlight on the nose, like this is too sharp, so we want to soften that slightly. This, we get a very strong highlight here, strong highlight right here, maybe a strong highlight right here where it sort of wraps the nose here, right? You've done some nice highlights on the lips. Okay, so always thinking about that. This is probably too thin. And it's not just the planes of the face here and the Loomis method and everything. It's more like the planes were mostly correct. This is like ultra like subtle work of like these really tiny shapes that you get, right? Incorrect based on the and it's based on the viewer position, not the lighting position. So highlights fall based on like viewer direction, right? So you need to, it's always going to be wherever halfway in between, right? So if she's turned a little bit, the highlights are going to rotate around to the shadow side slightly more, okay? I'll ask a question. Here's a question. Let's say we painted an eclipse, right? We painted a moon, okay? Where's the shadow side of the moon in an eclipse? Let's say the light was here, right? Let's say the light was directly above to the left, okay? So if the light was directly above and to the left, where would the highlight be? Would it be right here? Let's say this isn't a moon. Let's just say it's just a ball. Right? Where would it be? It's not here. It's not right in the middle. It's at the 45, right? Which is like somewhere around here. Okay? Because the viewer's looking, the center point of the op sphere is there, the center light is here, which is an imaginary point, and then the highlight would be right here. Okay? Now, if there was an eclipse and the light was directly behind it, the whole sphere would be in shadow. Volumetrically, the whole front side of the sphere would be in shadow if it was eclipsed. Where's the highlight go in that case? So in the case of an eclipse, this is actually like sort of how the Fresnel effect works. Yeah. The terminator and the highlight are in the same position in this case. Does that make sense? I know that's a weird concept. I wish I need just like a slightly satin ball to like demonstrate these things, but it's basically a rim light, yeah. It's a rim light, but in the case of like, if you think about it as a highlight and where the terminator would be, the terminator and the highlight now occupy the same position on the sphere. But basically, like if we turned her this way, the shadows would not move, but so if we rotated the figure this direction, okay, the light rotates with her, okay, but the viewer is moving this way relative to the light okay? So as the figure turns and the figure turns with the light, the viewer's perspective is rotating this way, which means all of the lights would then rotate this way. All the highlights, not the lights, just the highlights. Okay, all the general light would stay the same. Correct. Angle of incidence equals the angle of reflection. So, which means the opposite is true. As we rotate the figure this direction, so as the main view is rotated this way, all of the highlights rotate the opposite direction, right? So they all turn. As I turn this direction, my view is changing, but the light is moving with the figure, right? So the highlights move the opposite direction. Eventually, you get to the spot of position, right? Let's try and demonstrate. Okay. Maybe it would be better if I did this with a flashlight. and some kind of, okay. Lesson in light physics. Oh, okay. So where's a bottle? All right. So I have a bottle here. You can see the highlight, right? Yeah. You can see the clearly light and shadow on the bottle. Yeah. So I'm just going to move the light. Eventually, the highlight is now basically on the edge, and the terminator is now also on the edge as the light moves behind it. And the terminator and the highlight occupy the same spot. Okay? But if you looked at it from my perspective, the highlight is directly in front of me. Like if I did this, you see that there is the highlight, the terminator and the highlight are as far away from each other as possible. Okay? So as you move the light around, the highlight and the terminator get closer together as you look at it straight on. Okay? They're as far away from each other as they can be. And then as I do like this, right? They're getting closer together. You can see as I move it around, right? The highlight and the terminator slowly get closer together as I come around to the side until they're in the same spot. Okay. Did any of that make sense or was helpful at all? Apologies for what may be an obvious question. When painting for a comp, do you paint highlights for a specific viewing angle, or do you try? Don't even think of it for a comp. When I'm painting in general, I'm always painting the highlights based on a specific viewing angle. Even when I paint my tabletop figures, I paint the highlights based on a specific viewing angle. All right. So when you send me pictures, Dan, I am assuming that the picture you sent me is what you consider the main view. So I am basing where the highlight placement should be based off the view that you sent me, you know? Where if the viewer was more turned, like my version, where she's more looking straight forward and her shoulders are more turned to you, right? So she's more like looking straight on. The highlights on mine, even though the general light is the same, the highlights on mine are more centralized. Can I send? Yeah, I'll send it to myself. It's also from a lower angle. Right? So if we look at my version, right? The light, the main view is more straight on, right? Straight on the face. So the highlights are going to be more towards the center of the face because they're, as I rotate the figure, right? I rotated the figure one direction, the highlights move the other direction. Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering if it looks wrong in other secondary views, but I paint with a single angle as well. So it's like metallic. It's never going to be perfect. It's impossible to make it perfect without not painting highlights and using satin or gloss or whatever to create the highlights for you, but then you also have to control the lights, right? It's the thing people complain about with NMM. The thing people complain about with NMM where they're like, it only works from certain angles. That's true about highlights in general. Like, because their specular highlights are reflections, they also move, right? So the whole concept of like, oh, it only works from certain angles. It's like, yeah, it's everything does. Okay. Sophie. Hi, Eric. I was working on her since your last feedback, but I still have a lot to do. I've changed the color of the hair and was working on the animal, but I'm not sure if the colors match together. What can I do to improve the ambience? I think it works pretty well. I like it. I think the ambience, there's like a nice kind of purplish tone to the ambience, don't you guys think? I think the hair still, I don't know what I said last time, but the hair for me is probably still is too similar to the skin. I would, yeah, it's too similar in value. I would change it up, but I think she's working quite well. Keep going. I don't love talking about the same figure twice, so I don't have much to say. Like the volumes, the highlights, the ambience, I think is working pretty well. And yeah, I think it's pretty strong. And I don't think you need to overdo it, right? Like you have the purple in the shadows and a slightly warmer tone in the lights. Like I think it works quite well. Hey, Eric, looking for some feedback on a recently finished piece. Tried to lean into the demon vibes with lots of color. Well, big thing I'll say on the back is that values on the back with the hair are way off. It's like the hair is way too bright on the back compared to the rest of the figure. All right. Bum, 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 bum. I think it's working pretty well. I think one thing I see besides just like generally painting a little cleaner, right? Like this is not blended. Doesn't always have to be, but based on some of the other areas, how rendered they are, I think you could do a better job. Two sort of things. One, the eyes. We need a slightly darker tone towards the edge to give this eye a little more shape. Like we can do yellow, but you have to have a bit of darker color along the edge in order to make that eye shape readable. Otherwise the yellow gets kind of lost. All right. In the white legacy system. Okay. I don't know what this is going on. Oh, all right. It's complaining about my printer because of course it is. The other thing, please, guys, stop doing this cat thing, okay? Try and bridge that a little bit there. This drives me nuts. This makes it look like a cat. You end up with this like this kitty cat looking cleft lip thing where there's like a line here. Okay. Like, try and bridge that a little bit. There's a shadow that happens like there's a shadow that happens like here in this little volume, right? So connect those. Then the big thing I'm seeing is like you can pay, I see you've done some thin lines, but we need to create some thinner lines, right? So freehanding some of these veins to add like more little capillary veins. You get these like tiny little ones. It's almost like a lightning bolt, right? So it's like they're just too wide and just stop. Okay, so you have to like freehand some of them. You can add other little ones, right? These little ones that like web through the membrane, and it's going to create a much more, one, it's going to create more detail, but it's also going to look more natural. Okay, so it's not just like this big thick vein that just stops, right? It branches out into all these, I mean, they're literally like like veins and capillaries and things. They're like the roots of a plant. Okay, it's almost like identical. So they like reach out and start to branch more and more, and you get these tiny little ones. So we need to add some of those as we go. All right, and it'll make this much more interesting to look at. Okay. So it's like, why does this just stop? Bat wings. Show me the image, jeez. I hate Google image search, dude. Thing sucks. You see? You see it like branching out? It's like the leaf, it's like almost like the tree, right? You can start to see these little branching ones start to come off as it gets to the edge, right? So you get these thin little branching veins coming off. Okay? And I think that will add some more information and a little more exciting. Cool. How long are we going? I forgot to record any of this, so I'll be downloading it from what's it called later. Flapjack. All right, we'll come back to this. All right, I'll be right back. Take a quick break, and we will get to Flapjack. Be right back. Hi, I'm back. All right. So, Flapjack. I think the lighting is pretty good. I just think she's boring. And boring how? Like, boring in terms of color progression, ambience, Like, I feel like there's just more things similar to what we were talking about with the zombie, right? It's just like, what color is her hair? It's white, and it's all gray. It's just grays. There's like a little purple in there, transition kind of thing, but it's just kind of gray. This is just sort of gray. The white on her shirt, jacket is just kind of, it's just grays. This is just camo greens, right? It's like this. Okay, let's watch the yellow move as we go. So we got yellow, and then let's go down to the midtone, and we got yellow, and we got yellow, and it just like, it just doesn't really move at all. It moves a little bit, but not really. Okay. How about the skin? We got this sort of color, right? We're in here, right? Where do we go in the midtone? There. Like, it doesn't, there's no, like, shift. Everything's just, like, linearly stays right in the same spot. Okay? So, how do we make it more interesting? We modulate the colors. We introduce atmosphere or tone into the figure. Like, if we're going to do this sort of like purple yellow thing, okay, cool. Let's do some purple yellow thing. So it's like, let's take some purple and right. Let's give it some tone, right? So now everything's got like, instead, it's like this shifts through colors, right? I'm not saying we have to do it this much. Then we do something similar where we take like this light yellow and oh God. I don't know. None of these are going to work. No, none of these are going to work. I don't know. Maybe something like that, right? So we create something more interesting than just, you know, it's like this is all just sort of samey, same, whatever. Create some vibes, you know? Give it some vibes, dude. What if we do you know, some kind of cyberpunky thing, right? This where we play with these like cyan kind of teal and magenta thing or whatever, you know? There's just places that you can take this that'll make it so much more interesting than so linear. Okay? That's my big feedback to you, is just try and don't be so flat, right? The volumes and stuff are interpreted quite well. Like, this light is quite good. This is maybe slightly dark for what it should be, but you know, like maybe this should be slightly lighter over here. But in general, like, you just need to introduce more. Just play with the color more. Play with, give it some mood, you know? Could be a little more dramatic in spots. So even just using a similar color to the skin, like in the shadows of the green, like makes this more interesting. Yeah. All right. Outside of that, yeah, I don't have a lot to say about, just the general rendering of stuff. It's just, play around more, be a little more free, be a little more expressive with your color choices. Don't be so neutral. Yeah. Rude. Hi, Eric. Any feedback on this would be appreciated. Okay. Feedback number 1. That plinth and pin are way too big for this model. Like, enormously too large. Okay, where do we want the plinth to really be? Okay, here's a little plinth tip for you guys. A little rule of thumb. Typically, you want it around the shoulders. Okay. This is a better size. Okay. Proportionally, this is much more, much more natural. All right. And this rod, like the pin, is also gigantic. As far as the figure goes, this figure is hard. This is a hard figure to paint. Why? Because he has no face. My man, he's got no face. So it's quite difficult to get to draw the focus really where you want it on this guy. All right. So it can be very, and he's also like looking down. So one thing here is what I would recommend is making the red armor a bit shinier, which can be quite tough with a red. But we want to try and create some light here that's going to help draw a bit more of the eye where we want it. All right. We can create some highlights on these little things. We can create some highlights on these. Draw some attention to the face, because otherwise it gets really lost. All right, give it some shine. You can do the same on the shoulder too, a little bit. Then this is quite good, actually. I would maybe even push it a little bit more in a spot like near the face. You should probably have some highlight sort of down here on the inside of the axe bevel. Okay. Chest and stuff is pretty good. You can always push a little more light towards the viewer, like towards the head. And then we can always darken some things down where we don't want particularly a ton of interest, right? So as we get a little lower on him, we can intentionally kind of reduce the value overall to create this sort of vignetting. And draw more attention where we want. We can even push the contrast a bit more on the red in order to create some more contrast on the helmet to further push that light in a way that will create higher contrast there to draw attention. All right. But yeah, so you could see like pushing that contrast a little bit more creates a little more. Pushing that shadow just a little bit creates a little more contrast on the face, helps draw a little more attention. And the lights is the big thing, right? Like look at the difference in focus from this to this, right? Yeah, what do you guys think? Yes, no? Okay. Scott. Hi, Eric. Congrats on your medals at Multi. Thanks. I did this dude up. Excited for the slate of new Nurgle stuff GW previewed. I like it all. I also think it's pretty cool, especially the dark water stuff. It's really neat. So this is some practice. I tried to make the green helmet the only real saturated part of the mini to help draw focus. Did it work? If not, what should I do? Any other tips to boost this would be welcome. So it's very green, maybe a little too green. I think I would try and work a bit of that in elsewhere. So, like not just on the helmet, but also you can add a little bit to the shoulder, and then as you work your way down, you can reduce it a touch, you know? So like here, we can push the saturation some on the belly part, right? So then as it gets further away, we reduce it a little bit more. But I think you need at least a bit in order to not make it feel quite so much of its own thing. And then I would play with some of these yellows and stuff that you've got in other parts to maybe cool it or reduce it a touch here. I also like these sort of orangey sort of tones. You can play with these a little bit more, like introduce some more tones into the shadows and stuff. These sort of rusty colors create some interesting spots. And the focus still works, right? It's like the helmet is the most green, but we make it a little more cohesive, so it's yeah, it's not just like on its own the only bright green thing on the figure, you know. Then you can also use these sort of rusty oranges as a way to, yeah, we can use these as points of saturation also to create saturation this way, where we want to draw attention that you can not just the green, but like using orange in areas to as a secondary kind of color in order to create spots of like, yeah, this is also important, right? The scythe is quite important. As these areas get lower, these are not as important. We could even play, so we've got green, orange. We could even play, really green is more like these sort of yellowy colors. We could even play with some magenta tones. To help draw some other attention to where we want, like the hands are quite important. Like things like, I don't know, maybe around the neck, we can introduce a little more color, right? We could play around with the color variation in the skin. One thing I like actually is these sort of like ultra limey greens work really well as a highlight tone. Like I'm talking like Viridian, these like ultra lime greens can work as like a highlight skin color. So instead of a white, this like peachy white, you can use these sort of green tones to add some extra sickliness to the more pinky parts of the skin, right? Probably want something even brighter than that. What am I? Oh, this is a color layer. That's why it's not coming out as bright as I wanted. Right? So we can use this, yeah, this sort of yellow-green color works as a highlight color for the skin. And the more, because this is far away from this magenta, if you use more of these sort of magenta tones in the skin, it will contrast and start to create a natural color. Maybe stapler. Which one? I'm pretty sure I did. I just haven't posted it yet. I gotta post both of them. So I'll probably post them both tomorrow. Yeah, I looked at the orc. So it was on last week's video. I just haven't posted it to YouTube yet because I've been distracted. Warwolf. Hi, Eric. I just got back from money, and I'm glad I had the chance to say hi and chit-chat. Congratulations on your medal. Thanks. I'm happy I got a bronze in standard storytelling for my blue orc. You made feedback on. I placed this Mama Noma in standard fantasy, but I didn't receive anything. The competition was tough, but I think it is deserved, and I could improve my piece a lot. How should I proceed? One, I don't know if this is just the photo, but the first thing that stands out to me, right? What's the first thing that stands out to you guys? Tell me, chat. What's the first thing that comes to mind? Yup. It's super blown out. And I'm guessing that that is not necessarily the photographs. Yeah, everything is really high value. There's just like a lack of shadows. Yeah. Let's see what happens if I just do this. Let's duplicate the layer and let's just play with the curves. Okay. So we're just going to bring it down. Right? Bringing it down, bring it down. Okay. Which one feels better to you guys? Yeah, so I think the thing I'm seeing, yeah, everything just feels like way bright, right? Yes, there is room to. I saw your work in hand. Also, well, I saw it in person. There is improvement to be made in terms of technique, right? Like just being smoother. But like if we look at this part, right? This is not a shadow value. This is way too much of a middle value, right? So the biggest thing that I think could help you improve is you have a tendency to just go too bright on everything. All right, let's look at her nose. Her nose is casting a shadow. What is this like medium light gray? This is a shadow value. It should be in shadow, right? So make it in shadow. Right? People try and put way too much information in shadows. Okay? This is, if that's in shadow, the side of her face is in shadow. Right? There's some shadow here. There should be some shadow under her eye. All right? Okay. You're overdoing the lights. We need to, like, even this, like, this should be dark, right? Create areas of darkness. You're trying to put too much here. But yes, you would see some of this shape and this pattern and shadow, but we need to create light. We need there to be light areas and shadow areas. And don't get so gray in your shadows, right? This is so gray. Like your shadows can have some warmth to them, all right? Yeah, that is it. The shadow is just kind of desaturated instead of darker. Which sometimes shadows do get a little more desaturated, right? That happens. That can happen. But we don't want them to just turn gray, right? So try and use some color. You did in your reds, but I don't really feel like you did it in other areas. And you're overdoing your bounce lights. Like this bounce light is, this value is way too light for a bounce light, right? It's also way too purplish for some reason. Like, why is it going pink? It should be a tone like one, it should be more in the oranges, but then, so like these reddish, but then like up like this, right? So it grays, it does gray out a little bit, but it's not going to like shift color so much. Okay. Yeah, look at that. Like, look at. I gotta assume that the image is blown out. All right. Okay. Next. Papa Alexi added new photos, he says. Part of the base is now done. Okay. Oh, I should read what he said above, huh? Nice to see you back and ready to help. The base is obviously not done yet. You get an idea. Thanks for general feedback. Okay, so just general feedback. All right, general feedback. Okay. It is... This is a Lord of the Rings model? Is that what's going on? Is that what I'm looking at? Sorry. Middle Earth strategy battle game? Where do I, like, here's the thing. Alexi knows how to paint. He can paint quite well. I think this has an issue with composition. There's an idea in composition called the dagger, and it's basically like this idea that's like everything's just like it's just coming straight, like everything just points straight at you, and there's no. It can be very hard to get a sense of depth when everything is like, you know, like we don't have layers so much because everything just points straight at the. Everything's just a big triangle pointing at you. Okay? So what I'm seeing here is like everything is just like so in line with each other, right? You've got these compositional lines. You've got these like horizontal compositional lines of the stones and these vertical compositional lines which kind of extend backwards, but then it's like everything is just these like V shapes, right? Including this giant V shape, which then this thing is a huge V shape this way. So it can be very difficult to see, like, and on top of that, the figure is also like looking. We don't really get a good sense of the figure because everything is like looking straight forward. So like, where's his back legs? Like, what's the... I feel like this figure probably works better when you spin him slightly this way. Okay? I'm also not so sure what's going on. Like, this is gonna sound harsh, but I don't know if this figure works on this base. I get the like Mordor idea here. You're trying to make a this Mordor scene, but I think it might be a bit much. I think there might be too much going on, and it's not the best way to frame this figure. This figure, I think, probably also works a little better when it's not so... Yeah, it's too much. I think this figure probably works better if you can view it from multiple angles, right? You can spin it a little more. And yeah, I feel like this thing is really limiting the view here with just the shape of this whole base, like really limits the viewing angle. And I think I'd want to see it be able to spin some more. So in my opinion, I would simplify. It's too much right now. Yeah. Also, like, what is he coming out of? Where is he going? Is he like, the wolf to me feels like he's about to like buck this dude like down the stairs, you know? Like he's gonna just like, right, like. So if it was me, I would consider a new base that maybe is a little more simplified, shows off the figure a little more, and gives us a little more viewing angles. Because at the moment, I don't think it's quite working. Those steps would be like this. Those are like a ladder also. So, compositionally, avoid daggers, okay? Avoid these like triangles like pointing straight at the viewer. This is not the best like compositional lines. Typically you might want to offset it to one side or something, so instead of like a perfect diamond like this, right, you would have more something like offset like this. So it would be like this sort of offset diamond. So the whole thing's turned slightly on its axis. And yeah, open up the composition a little more. Let's just see how we feel. Okay, I'm gonna turn this layer off. What if okay. Like, we get rid of some noise, you know? There's just like so much noise happening. If you wanted to do this sort of gate thing, I feel like you would need more breathing room, right? So his tail's like going into it, right? This is also really harsh because there's so much I could talk about here with composition, like in terms of like why you would use a backdrop like this. Typically when you use a backdrop like this, with this like bright color, you use it in order to like frame around the figure, right? So it wouldn't just be like this medium gray, it would be like this very light gray that like creates a nice like light backdrop for the figure to frame against. So it would be like even something as bright as this, right? And then you're dealing with the problem of this thing like creating an annoying cast shadow that you don't really want. So yeah, it would be something more along the lines of this super light background, but the framing of it is creating this big like thing here is creating too much of a natural shadow to kind of allow that. Yeah. Anyways, I know this wasn't super helpful in terms of like actionable things that you should do, but my recommendation would be to brainstorm some simplified compositions in order to make this work a little better. Okay. Might need to rethink the base in this guy. All right. Mirage Builds Lucas. Hi Eric, I hope you had a great time traveling and thank you for helping us again. This is inspired by a painting by Jesper. Love Jesper. But I have paused this paint job because I can't quite get it to work. I feel like all the single elements work alone but not in cohesion. Any feedback is greatly appreciated. Also, I don't know what to with the back side view. Also, I don't know what to do with the back side view. So maybe you could add a comment or two. Let's look at the Jesper art. Okay, very Jesper. Loving he loves them lavenders. Okay. Looks cool. This is not bad. Why does it feel so different between this and this? Something's going on with the color here. The light, something's odd. Okay. I mean, I don't think it's bad. But let's look at what makes the original work, okay? Or the inspiration work. Like, why does this piece work? What makes his painting really good? Okay, so we're gonna save. Also, if you guys don't know how to take pictures of a figure on a black background, take it on white, right? Because this is or like a neutral gray or something, because it's really hard to see values against this like dark gray background. In fact, I would prefer neutral gray backdrops so I can get a better like these like neutral light gray backdrops. But let's critique Jesper Rising. We're not going to critique. We're going to look at what makes it work so well. So, what is interesting about this piece? So, first of all, what is the focus of this piece? Is it the dragon? Is it the lady? I think it's the knight, not so much the dragon. The dragon is the second most important thing, right? But I think the rider is the main point of interest. So what is he doing here in terms of composition that makes it so interesting is that look at this spiral composition. Okay. We have this that comes up and around and in circles. We have this that comes down. We have this that comes down. Okay. But even these little dragons in this rock further continue this sort of spiral, right? So we have the spiral in here, okay? So all of these lines like spiral into the center, yeah? Then let's check Jesper's values. Let's see if he knows how to paint with values. Ooh, look at them wings, huh? Look at that wing. It's like gray. Okay, this one's a big shadow shape. All right, where's the brightest parts? Where's the brightest part? It's not back here. It's not even on the dragon like this. Yeah. Okay, let's put this on the rider. Yeah, see, even the dragon face is a little bit darker than what we've got here. Okay, so the two most important parts here are the brightest things, the brightest elements, right? Highest in terms of value. Let's look in terms of color. Yeah. Okay, now that we introduce color, now what else do we have? We've got these more yellows, these more warm tones, these reds that add extra focus. In fact, it's quite interesting that the rider itself has a separate color palette to most of the rest of the scene. Most of the rest of the scene is this like sort of analogous color palette that goes through these kind of, it goes through what? These like pink, magenta, blue, like sort of colors. We don't even really get to blue. It's like this sort of lavender, ultramarine-y kind of color. Yeah? What color do you think this is up here? I'm slightly off. It's a little bit more blue, but it's not into these like teal blues, right? It's all these like purpley kind of tones, right? So we get these like indigo through these magentas and reds. Eventually we get these yellowish colors as accents, but they're used very sparingly where we want to draw attention. Okay. Even these like slightly orangish tones, they're really red. Yeah. They're orange, but they're really more like a pinkish red. Okay. Like this looks very orange here, right? Orange goes like all the way up into here, but these are like more into the reddish tones. So you have a very clear like focus, okay? And this very analogous color palette of these kind of pastel-y, see how gray these are? Yeah, this is gray, super gray blue. So the most saturated colors tend to they tend towards the like focal areas and the foreground, right? Hello, Michael Paints Minis. Thanks for the gifted tier 1. Thank you. Okay, so let's look at your dragon. purple, magenta. Okay, we got some blues. And then we got some of these gray purples. And then we got pink. Where's all these? You know, like where's the oranges and stuff, you know? Where's my oranges at? Why is this so white? You know? This is like magenta pink. Where's my like red oranges, right? Then okay, let's look at values. Where's the where are my values at? Where's my bright areas? Okay, the dragon face. Yeah, it's not bad. Not bad here. Probably the dragon face is the brightest part, right? Is that C.A. Jackson? Hello, right? So probably this, but then also kind of this, and then like the base is like really bright for some reason, and there's some elements of bright spots on the rider, but not as much as I think we could. Okay, so what we want to do, we want to play, I don't know if this is just a photo, but we want to warm up the highlights, okay? We need them to be more red, like look how instantly just like shifting everything more warm red we get. Dang it, hold on. Make another layer. There we go. Okay, so let's do that again. All right, so by shifting the highlights more warm red, all right, we instantly get closer to that, the feeling of the painting, yeah? Then what we got to do, okay, we need to darken areas that are less important. So as we get further away from the scene, the important areas, we need to tone these parts down. Okay, his hands, the dragon's hand isn't that important, right? None of this is that important. Okay, we're going to reduce some of these areas. Okay, we're definitely going to reduce these areas. Like all of this. All this stuff down here, who cares? Tone it down, all right? In fact, let's make it even more purplish. Guys overuse value sometimes. You need to use value to create visual hierarchy. All right? There also should be basically no like pure grays. Okay? This is too pure gray. Let's find something that's pure gray in this scene. Okay, what do you think would be pure gray? Well, I think the rocks, I guess. Yeah. They're kind of orange, kind of blue. Yeah. All right. So we can do something like that. But they have a warmer tone and they're intentionally shifted more warm. So it's like you're dealing with more tones like that. If we're trying to create contrast from all this cold, we have to use a warm gray in order to create some contrast from all the cold, okay? Then we can start to play with, in fact, I don't really see much of this sort of blue in the painting. That's probably way too teal. That might have happened from the color shift. Yeah, a little bit. Okay. Yeah, then we could start to play with some of these like lavender blue sort of bounce, like these cold areas that are, we reduce some of the contrast down here by using these sort of lavender blues to create more areas of color, right? We can do that on parts of the dragon. The value is important here, that it's not so different, right? And then we got to create more light. So where is like the bright oranges and stuff on the rider, right? We need these sorts of tones that are gonna like push the focus more on these areas of importance. Right, these sunny skin tones and things that create the light that we need to draw the attention where we want. Okay. So let's see how we, let's bring back the original. Yeah, very pale and pink, right? We see we shift the view immediately. Like, where does your eye go? Where is your eye here? Right? And where is it now? Come on, chat. Got 70 viewers. One of you guys can give me a response. I didn't change really the thing. Yeah. Yeah, it shifts from the base and the wing more towards the rider, right? So we're bringing it all, we're taking all of the view and we're moving it this way. We're going to move it up. Okay. Okay. It might. But anyways. Gray epoxy. Oh my God, wall of text. Okay. Hi Eric, hope you had a great trip. Welcome back. Blah, blah, blah. Thanks for your time and being generous. Okay, have been working on this bust on and off for 2-ish months and trying to do my own spin on the box art. Was attempting to replicate a warm light from the front and a cooler one from the back. I realized after refining for a while that while I think it has a little bit of that, it's not nearly as dramatic as the box art. So that's something I'm going to try again on a new piece. I'm working towards, oh my God. Here is still work in progress, and metals on the shadow side are mostly base coated. Some of the green paint on the shadow side also picked up a bit of satin sheen. Otherwise, wasn't planning on doing anything else, like some fancy colored light side light. Whew. Okay. So, I think the general lights and shape is pretty good. Yeah, it's not bad. There's like some of the cast shadows, some of the metallic colors are nice. I feel like it has more contrast from this side than it did from the other, so this is one of those times that I look at it and go like, am I just seeing the photography or what's going on here? But this, because this looks quite flat where the other side looks quite contrasty. Like this. Maybe. All right. Anyways. So, I think mostly pretty good. There's some stuff with the face that I think is a little off. One is definitely the shadow here. So you have this shadow that kind of goes here from the hair, but then there's this shadow here, the face, even though the direction of the light coming in would be blocked here. So we would get more light down the side of the face here. This would also come across, so like this sort of shape you've got here. But we would probably get a little more shadow of the nose and around the jaw here. So let's play around with some of these. So what we probably want to do is we want to take some of this mid-tone here, pull this light down a little bit further on the face, make that a little more obvious. Okay. So we don't have to shadow that so much. This is a thing I see all the time. People try and darken this like area when doing a Rembrandt light way too much. They try and make it like way too dark. Soften this. This is pretty good. But then we want to create this little shadow here, right? To play. You have to have the shadow from this nostril so that it goes across the nose. Okay. Something like so. And I think that will help a lot. This is another thing I see all the time is people push this like highlight like all the way into these corners. One, get rid of this. The edge doesn't want to be there. But it's this thing. Like, I don't know why people do this all the time, but it's like this sort of highlighting where it's like, I'm going to push this highlight like to the edge, right? So anyways, we want to soften this a little bit, right? Avoid lines. We want a little more rounded shapes, right? So think of a point, right? There's a point on the face where there's a highlight, okay? And that point then radiates outwards. So if there's a point here, because the volume of the head is round, it then radiates out from there, right? If there's a point here, we need to radiate out from there. It's not a line that goes like across. It's a point here that then gets softer as it goes out from that. All right, if there's a point here, then it softens out from there. You maybe have one right here on the lip, on the chin. Okay, maybe there is one here, but we soften out. But then it should go across the eyelid a little bit. All right, so avoid trying to like making your highlights like so sharp where you push them right up next to the next, like you push them all the way up to the next volume. Sometimes you want to push the light up to the next volume, right? That makes sense. But when you do highlights, like it can be very easy to like create these smiley faces, you know, where it's like, I'm going to draw this like loop, and you don't really want to do this. You want to think of these as like little round shapes that then connect with each other, you know? In terms of that stuff, I think that's all looking pretty good. I think some of the leather is maybe overdone. You need some areas to be a little darker, especially when you're dealing with the high contrast of the metal. So like here, some people might say that this leather is like too bland. I actually kind of appreciate a slightly more subdued look to the leather here, because it gives these areas where you can like these areas of lower contrast in order for the areas of high contrast to be more high contrast, you know? If everything is high contrast, then nothing is high contrast by comparison, right? We have to contrast the contrast. We got layers. There's levels to this shit. You know what I'm saying? We got contrast on contrast, baby. So, we create some areas of lower contrast in order but the areas of high contrast be more interesting. And then we can push some lights a little more. We can make some areas of even shinier parts on the metal, right? We can really like give it some sparks, you know? Okay, this stuff's pretty nice. You can also, look what happens when I paint over this. What happens to the shadow areas, right? Okay, when you paint over this, when I push light over the shadow, if I want to create a super bright light right there, what happens to the shadows that are right next to it? I create a shine that is so intensely bright, this like spark of light that is so bright that it actually reduces the light in the shadows a little bit, right? So what we're kind of simulating by doing this is like the effect of like bloom, right? If I say, like, do you know what I mean when I say bloom? That's like when you look at a street lamp and it's like so bright that it's like radiates out, right? Almost like a lens flare, yeah. But like it happens to your eyes naturally too. Like you look at a really bright light source and it has this almost halo like shine to it, right? We simulate that by reducing the shadows a little bit, and that creates this effect of it like being so intensely bright that the darker shadows right next to that shine are reduced. Okay? Now the highlights on her skin don't look so bright in comparison. So we can maybe push these a little bit more, you know? I tell people at work, if everything is an emergency, then nothing is an emergency. Glad to see it works for painting too. Exactly. If everything is contrasted, then nothing's got contrast. Or if everything is the same level of contrast, then nothing's got contrast. All right. So, yeah. All right. Let's see how this... We'll just duplicate the layer so we can see like all the changes together, right? So we reshape the face a little bit by adjusting that shadow. We push the highlights a little more, and we reduce the contrast in some spots and also add some shine where we need. All right. How we doing on time? It's been 2.5 hours. Okay, I'm going to take another quick little break, and I'll be back in a minute, and then we will continue on. We'll look at this Roman guy, or Greek. I think he's Greek, actually. Be right back. Hello. Hi. Hi, hi, hi. Okay. More figures. Let's look at this hoplite. Hi, Eric. Could you please review this 28mm Victrix hoplite that I've converted to look like Perseus? Female head. Okay. What do you guys think? What am I going to say? What's the first thing I'm going to say? What do you guys think I'm going to say? What's it going to be? You gotta paint your base, okay? Gotta paint that. Gotta paint that grass. Gotta paint your grass, dude. Yeah, there's just there's a difference in which is okay. There's a difference in style between this and this. This is all very soft and naturalistic, and then this is very cartoonish, yeah? It's got this like heavy, cartoony, kind of reminds me actually of like older heavy metal style, like before they, before they shifted to like everything focused on just edge highlighting. Kind of that old Mike McVeigh kind of style. Good night. Paint your dang grass, dude. So, how do we do that? One way to do that is with an airbrush. Okay, so we can use an airbrush with some darker colors. Maybe we want to use, what we got? We've got kind of yellow and greens and reds. Maybe we can use some darker reddish tones to add like these darker orangish browns to add some shadows into here, right? So we want to create some vignetting here because the base is quite large for this figure. All right, so we can create some shadows here in order to help create some light sort of in the middle. See the difference? And I'll lower this a little bit. I don't need it quite that much, but look how much just doing that does towards creating some more focus on the figure, yeah? We're pulled into the middle, yeah? Okay, and then what we can do is we can add some more color to some parts. All right, we want to add some more light to some areas. Create some more areas of focus. Okay, things like this. We want to create some light here. All right, create some more light on the arm. Okay, so subtle changes here, but look what happens to now the light on him, right? So by pushing the light on him, now we introduce more focus on him. So between these two things, by darkening the base a little bit and then adding some light on him, we create something that is kind of meh, you know, there's not a lot going on, right? Yeah, there's heavy contrast here, but we can push, right? We can push the focus more. Okay. Even adding some more light to the face of the Medusa. Oh, apple, the pencil's low, right? We create. And we can even maybe push the light a little bit as it gets closer to some of the points of interest on the base. You know? You can dry brush the tips of the grass after you apply some shadows. We create something with a little more drama. Now, this is something that I will mention, and oh, he did do it, actually. That's quite nice. Yeah. I was going to say, creating this kind of sloped shape to the base is will make it more interesting. From the front, it's not really there, so that's why I was going to mention it, but from the back, you do have it. So I maybe would have made that slope a little more gradual, so you would have seen some of that slope like from the front view a little more, but I think it works quite well from the back or from the, yeah, see how it's like so abruptly sharp? I think I would have tried to make that a little more gradual and create a little bit more sloping from the front view, but pretty cool. Okay. Space Marine heads, huh? Hey, Eric, just completed 5 Space Marine heads last night and wanted to get your take on them. If there are many here, I'd like to know more of your thoughts on the salamander head. Okay, let's look at some Space Marine heads. So, number one thing, I see it immediately, okay? Your 5 o'clock shadows are too abrupt, okay? It's not a face mask, you guys. Like, your beard is not a face mask, all right? So, one thing, okay, the 5 o'clock shadow here does not come all the way up to here, right? Look at me. Hello, hi, look at me, okay? Does my beard come all the way up to my nostril right here? Or no? Does it come across my face like this? All right. So you need to take some skin tone . Okay, there needs to be skin tone here. That then transitions into those colors, all right? Same here. This is too abrupt, all right? So it needs to change from one to the other, all right? Not just become like there's not a perfect edge there. So that needs to have a transition to it. Okay. Same down here. There should be a little bit of skin tone in some of the parts down here. All right. Now, this eye is, I don't know what's going on here. This is wonky. Okay. Next thing. All right. Highlight on the nose. We need a little more highlight on the nose. A little more highlight here to draw out this shape. Get a little highlight in the corner of the mouth. All right. Then this is the other deal. Okay. These are too like, we don't want that. All right. This should not like cut all the way down the mouth like this. It's too much. Well, this guy needs to be like way softened out. All right. Oh, you got to work on your, some of the refinement on these a little more. But let's look at this guy again. Okay, so you get the shadow here, this shadow shape. Then as it starts to come, when it changes from this direction to this direction, right? It needs to get softer and more soft than what you're doing. So it needs to start to fade away a little bit. Okay. So it's more of a mid-tone value. Then you can do cool stuff like create more shadow down here. Get that scowl really going. Okay. You can play with the shadow of the jawline some more. All right. So as this shape transitions from horizontal to vertical, that shape is going to reduce. All right. You can play around with some of the shadow underneath the eye. This shape here doesn't need to be quite so strong. All right, and then you've got to come back with some, depending on how scowly and angry you want to make them look, because they're space marines and you can come back and use some of these middle values to push some of these shapes a little more. All right, so we can exaggerate some of the features a little bit in order to make him very tough looking, very scowly. Are these kill team heads? I don't know. They're just Space Marine heads that he's practicing on. I don't know what they're for specifically. Okay. Like this guy, right? Like there needs to be shape to his nose. Okay. So we have to get some shape around. That's an important shape. This shape, the shape of the mouth, the shape around the eye. Like these are landmark features. Okay. Then you can work on softening other parts. All right. Like he's got a little too much shape in contrast. So some of the parts are quite good, but then other parts we want to reduce a little bit. All right. So like he doesn't really have a clear mouth shape. This is too harsh. This is too harsh. So we want to reduce a little. And then he's got a really wide like jaw for some reason. I mean, he's a Space Marine, so he has a really wide jaw. That's not that unusual. But we can thin that out a little bit so he doesn't look quite so puffy. So sometimes you have to play with some of the shadows and things to kind of like re-sculpt the face a little bit, to thin parts out and like square up the jaw and stuff a little more, so he's not so yeah. Puffed up. And then this needs to be cleaned up. You need these like sharp, there should be some sharp line work here to like really clean up the hairline and make it nice and clean, you know. I don't know what happened to his nose. Okay, even on this guy, right? Like if we're doing a salamander, we want to make sure that we've got these clean shapes that go around and define the major features of the face. Okay, so we got to get like the lower eyelid, the eyebrow, upper lip, so you want it to be nice and defined, certain parts to be nice and defined so it's readable, and then other parts to be soft. Yeah. These tiny heads, they're challenging. Okay. Guardian Spirit entered this at standard level in MPO, my first fully painted bus. I looked at it a few weeks ago, more like a couple months ago, but redid everything, changed light direction, so basically a new model. Will take any feedback to bring with me to the next one. I think I remember looking at this. This looks way better than where it was. Yeah, I'm impressed, honestly. I think the lighting looks quite good. The face looks quite nice. There's still some weirdness because of the sculpt, like the eyes are a little bizarre. But the nose and the face looks quite good. I like the sheer fabric a lot. I think this is really good. In fact, I don't really have anything to say about that. I think one of the only things I'm seeing is just like we could take some dark color like this or something, right? And we could create a little more definition in some areas. So like getting the hair nice and defined around the face, just to create some stronger separation there. Right. So just lining these things a little bit more, just to make it a little more readable at a. Okay. So I think that's one thing. And then yeah, the other thing is on the face. Like this is quite good. I really like the shape of the nose, and the lighting position here is really good. This is, yeah, like this could be more defined, right? Just so it's a little clearer and separated. Yeah, I think there's like the eyes. The eyes is definitely something here. So it's like we could give her a little more shape to the eye. This is such a odd shape here that it's like. Right, something like this. And the eye is like you can create some volume to the eye a little bit. Sometimes you have to just like redraw this. You have to kind of like sculpt it yourself by creating like a little bit further shape or shadow than's really there. Yeah, you can play around, but I think in general this is quite good. I'm impressed. The other thing is maybe playing around with some of the saturation in the skin just a touch. Like we could, let's make this a new layer and just play with like a color layer maybe, or saturation. Like could push like a little bit of color into her cheeks and skin here, just a touch, just to create some tonal variation and add a little bit of life to the skin. Like to do it around the collarbone a little bit too is typically a part with some more reddish tones. I was struggling a little on the NMM neck. Yeah, I mean, but it works, right? I think it's fine. But yeah, I think it's quite a good job. Huge improvement over the previous. Pow. All right. It's been a while since I painted a miniature. I'm trying to understand better how colored lights interact with the colors of the surfaces. Oh boy. What a topic. You and 99% of the entire of painters don't understand this. It is one of the most difficult things to grasp and explain. I feel I just painted everything almost with only the light color and not the surface color itself. But it does not look bad, so I'm not sure what I'm actually looking for. Yeah, so colored light, and there's not a super easy way to explain this. Hold on, give me a second. Let me look up where's my NMM slide? I don't know how much I want to like redraw all over your figure. Instead, I'll just answer your question and explain some of these concepts. Okay, so question for people. Here, I'll switch it to this slide. This is a epilepsy warning for anyone. So if you have epilepsy, do not look at this. You've been warned. So the color of objects in your scene affect the color and brightness of the light reflected off of it. So like we've talked about, you have light and you have highlights, specular highlights. This guy's shirt basically has almost no specular highlights. What color is this guy's plaid shirt? Chat. You don't know. We don't know. What color does it appear? It appears green. How about now? Yeah? Let's play it again. So, the reason it appears... All right. Okay, epilepsy warning over. The reason it appears green and black is because there is something in his shirt that reflects green, and there are other parts that don't reflect green. So green, right? Green objects reflect, or they absorb all color of light except for green. Okay? So anything that is not green on his shirt or includes green in some way, right? Yellow actually, and when you're talking about light, includes green, because light is additive, not subtractive. Well, there's very sciencey stuff going on here, okay? But because if you imagine how your monitor that you're watching this on right now, it has 3 colors of pixels. It has blue pixels, it has red pixels, and it has green pixels. The red and the green pixels add together to create yellow light. Okay? So they're wavelengths of light adding together to create the color that's in between those wavelengths. All right? So the reason this guy's shirt looks green and black is because the parts that do not reflect any green light appear black to us. Okay? The parts that are red, or the parts that, so any of the red parts of his shirt appear black at the moment because there's only a green light. Any of the parts that appear, so technically the green squares on his shirt right now could be white squares because white reflects every color, right? So his shirt could be white and black. It could be a white and black checkered plaid, okay? With only a green light and it's reflecting. So we don't know, okay? Epilepsy warning again. I'm going to press and pause it at another spot to... No. Why can't I want to pause it. Let me pause. Okay, so now when we get a scene, a view, because we can see the guy in the background, he's a little more lit up right now. Now you can see that there's like these bluish or teal squares and kind of red squares. Okay, so different parts of his shirt light up, different colors. All right. So there's clearly red in his shirt somewhere. So we're combining these sorts of colors. We combine lights and the shirt absorbs in different ways. So you have to consider the color of the material and the color of the light that reflects off it. And if we look at this guy, this chart that I made, you can see that the way light works is additive in the top right, okay? So the green and the red combine to make yellow, the red and the blue combine to make magenta, and the green and the blue combine to make cyan. Where pigment, like what's in your color printer at home, is subtractive. So we combined the opposite way, where yellow and cyan, which is the way paint works, right? So when you're painting OSL in this way, you're actually working inversely to how light actually works. So when yellow and cyan light or pigments combine together, they create green. When yellow and magenta pigments combine together, they create red. And when magenta and cyan pigments combine together, they create blue. All right? And then when you combine them all, they create a chromatic black. Okay, where you add all the wavelengths, the different color wavelengths of light together, you create white light. All right. If you look at this chart, right, if we look down the white column, the white shows everything. It shows all the colors, right? So we get a white object reflecting, but showing red on the bottom, magenta, blue, cyan, green, yellow, orange, right? But you can see if we go to the blue circle or the green circle, for example, right, the green sphere, none of that red light is diffused on the bottom of it. However, because it is shiny, the surface of the material reflects some of the red light on the bottom of the surface. Okay? So the red specular light does appear on the green object. But, so the highlight does, the diffused lighting does not, where if you look at the yellow one right next to it, the red light shows up underneath it, okay? Now, most materials are not pure color, okay? So if we consider a Caucasian skin tone, for example, you can see that every color will show up on it. Where can we find this chart for reference? In the reference channel of my Discord. Okay. So, me too, I just wish it had a purple violet. Yeah, purple violet is more like magenta. By the way, if you stand next to an open sign, right? Like if you go stand next to an open sign outside a building, which has a red and blue neon light, they're all LEDs now, but a red and blue light, they combine to make a magenta light. Okay. So you can see because a skin tone is very gray, right? A grayish tone has a bit of all colors in it, so it will tend to show more colors than that. So most tones, most tones have at least some, they're not perfect. Okay. See you, guy in spirit. Okay, so they're going to show some color. And then depending on how reflective an object is, it will show the specular of that. All right. All that's to say is that depending on, you have to consider the material, the shininess of the material, what color is the material, and then what color will those materials reflect. All right. Oof. Here we can see Darth Vader, right? He's wearing black. The black should not show any red, right? It's a red light, but black absorbs every color. So why do I see some red on him? Because you're seeing specular reflections, okay? Which is why his chin shines so much. All right. Which also shows that even fabric has some specularity to it. Okay? It's just much more soft and diffused. Okay, let's look at the actual figure. So, thinking about the actual figure, pretty good actually, with the black and the yellow. You just need to use more, I think you need more shadows, all right? So you're not using enough actual black to give a dark, as dark a moody vibe as you want. So if you want this thing to really appear like a dark scene, you need to use a bit more black, all right? You also need lining. You need some more dark lining, things like around all these straps on the boots and stuff. Okay, so. All right, guys, I think I'm gonna have to stop there for the night. Okay? Let me look at this real quick, because Sammy, I don't have much to say. You know what I would compare this to? The painting itself is very good. Because I don't want to do a whole big paint over on this. So I'm just going to look real quick. You could always introduce a little more color into the skin. You have the same problem. So go to the feedback of, where is it? Of Flapjacks. Same feedback. Okay. That's what I have to say. So, in terms of painting technique and stuff, yes, some of this is a bit rough, but it's a little bland. I like the reflection in the coffee mug a lot. It's very good. Like see that white reflection in the liquid. Oh. All right. So, thanks for hanging out, guys. I hope that was helpful, because my pencil's about to die and then I can't paint over any stuff. So, I hope that was interesting. I'm trying to catch up. You guys post so many pictures. I'll do another one next week. Okay. But for this week, we are done. I'm sorry. Let's raid. Come on, let me type. All right. Gonna raid Useless Wizard. Guys, thanks for hanging out. Hope you have a good weekend. And I'll see you on Wednesday. Bye. Bye-bye.